In this video, we're going to go over some of the basic variations for the fourth question type in the argument section, the assumption questions. Okay, so let's take a look at some basic information. So assumption questions, in the assumption questions, the content is always an argument. Now, in order to identify an assumption in an argument, there needs to be an argument present. And once again, that doesn't mean that it's an obvious or simple argument. Part of the difficulty with these questions is the sometimes complex nature of the argument. Okay, so this question has several different wording variations. You see the one we have up here is which one of the following is assumed in the passage, or it could also say which one of the following is an assumption required by the passage, or which one is an assumption on which the argument depends or relies, or the argument requires one of the following assumptions or one of the following to be assumed. So essentially, you're going to get some variation on assumption or assumed in the question type. So you need to be on the lookout for that. Okay, the correct choices in these questions state the information that best states the assumption in the argument. And these questions appear regularly in every test, often, several times per section. So this is one of the more common question types, like weaken and strengthen. So essentially, assumption questions test your ability to evaluate the relationship between the premises and the conclusion. An assumption on the LSAT is an unstated premise that is sufficient or necessary for the conclusion to be true. And there are two major types of assumptions. There are assumptions that close a logical gap in the argument. For example, there's a shift in terms or there's new information in the conclusion or subconclusion. And there are assumptions that present information that's a requirement for the conclusion to be true, or information that counters a possible objection or problem with the argument. And we're going to go over both types in these movies in this section. Okay, so let's go over the approach to the first assumption question type. Now, the premises and the conclusion are the most important things to analyze. So you need to have a good idea of how the premises support the conclusion, and you need to concentrate on the unstated assumptions. The strength and nature of the premises and the conclusion by themselves is less important. So this is the type where we're looking to close a logical gap. So first, you establish a clear picture of the structure of the argument, and in particular, you locate the logical gaps between the premises and the conclusion. There will be new information in the conclusion that relates to the premises or one premise in particular. The more difficult questions will have the logical gap be less obvious between the premises and the subconclusions or unstated subconclusions. Next, you think of ways to close the gap with premises that relate the new information in the conclusion to information in the premises. So this kind of assumption allows you to move from premises to conclusion by making explicit the connection between them. And in this case, for the right answer and wrong answer, the correct answers will provide an assumption that makes the connection between the premises and the conclusion explicit. And generally, the choice will simply equate information from the premises with the new information in the conclusion. The incorrect answer will not make the connection between the premises and conclusion explicit. The incorrect choices will not deal with what the argument is talking about, and you need to be careful of choices that use similar concepts that are subtly but importantly different. Okay, so the basic approach to doing these questions, this variation of the assumption question, is to have a good grasp of the argument, to locate the logical gaps by looking for subtle shifts or new information in the conclusion or subconclusion or between premises, and to pick the choice that expresses that. It's key to have a clear understanding what the premises and conclusion are and what precisely they're talking about in order to not pick the wrong choice, since that's what the test makers are hoping that you do.